Still really struggling with my suicidal depression. Feel like I'm in the deepest, darkest pits of despair. But I have been cleaning my apartment a lot. It's time to talk about the discography for one of the most underappreciated progressive metal bands, Redemption. Now, if you're familiar with the band, you know how awesome they are. But if you don't, and sadly that's far too many people, this is one of the best run, strongest lineups in progressive metal. All 8 albums have something amazing to be able to show off, with some amazing singers attached, some amazing musicians attached behind that, and I kinda helped their career in the most minute ways, and we'll get to that in a moment. But let's start everything off with the 2003 album, Redemption by Redemption. The 2003 self-titled album is something that is quite underrated when it comes to the whole band's discography. It is the lone album with Rick Matthias doing vocals. It has Jason Rulo of Symphony X on drums. Of course, you got Nick Van Dyke, the mastermind of Redemption. Bernie Versailles, who unfortunately had a brain aneurysm and had to be on hiatus from the band. He is still recovering, and I hope one day he'll be able to rejoin the band. This album is a fantastic prototype for what the band would become. Even though such amazing staples are on this album, the 4-part suite, Desperation, is something that is a ear to behold if you give it the chance. Nocturnal is a song that I remember seeing them play, and I know is occasionally played whenever they do play shows. And of course, the nearly 25-minute epic masterpiece, Something Wicked, This Way Comes. And thankfully, no one a part of Redemption did anything like Iced Earth, so the phrase in metal, Something Wicked This Way Comes, has not been tarnished for me yet. Yeah, this is a great prototype for what the band would become. I feel like they only get stronger from here on out, but I really love everything that happened with this album. I'm only giving it a C because of how strong the band would eventually become. I highly recommend checking this album out, and of course checking out the other 7 as well, but I think it's something that you might enjoy as well if you enjoy some great progressive metal on the dark side. Coming up next is the sophomore album, The Fullness of Time, and this is the first album that features longtime vocalist Ray Alder of Fate's Warning being in the band for a predominant amount of the rest of the band's career, except for the last 2 albums, but we will be getting to that. And I really feel like this is the first Redemption album where everything clicked the way it was supposed to. It's very dark, brooding progressive metal, which is why I've always been attracted to it. And Ray Alder's voice is something to behold on this album. And it only gets stronger as he continues on, in my humblest of opinion. The 4-track suite of the title track, The Fullness of Time, is simply remarkable. I love everything that goes along with it. The first track, Threads, is one of my favorite older era of Redemption songs. Sapphire is an incredible song as well. I just love everything about this album, and there isn't really anything I can find wrong with this album other than the fact that I feel like the band just continuously keeps getting stronger and stronger from this point on. And because of that, I'm gonna give it a B. And now it's time for the album that got my attention and so many others, the truly landmark album, The Origins of Ruin. Everything about this album is a fantastic masterpiece. It takes everything that I loved about The Fullness of Time and just perfects it. There's so many great songs on here. Memory is one of my favorite Redemption songs of all time. The fact that they still play songs off this album is just incredible to see. And it got the attention of so many people, including the likes of Dream Theater, who I actually got to see open for Dream Theater when they played Minneapolis for the first, and I can only assume last time, because the band only gets to do festival appearances, one-offs, and short mini tours, even if that nowadays. And very understandably so. I mean, everyone in the band is quite busy in their own endeavors. But yeah, what an incredible show that was. Dream Theater, Redemption, and Into Eternity, with Stu Block on vocals. That was a killer show. But they were representing the Origins of Ruin on this tour. I kick myself all the time for not getting merch. at that show. Little did I know that that was probably going to be the last time I was ever going to see them, being the first time I'd ever get to see them. But if you had to start with any Ray Alder album, I could not recommend The Origins of Ruin more. From start to finish, it is just pure, utter perfection of what dark progressive metal is all about. And if you haven't figured it out by now, yes, I am giving it an S. And now for short story time. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this. I didn't get to really talk about it much, but this is the part where I kind of helped out the band in the tiniest of ways. You see, back when they did Prog Power, at their very first Prog Power, I believe, I might be wrong on that, but I don't want to check. They recorded their set, and it was for the time of being able to promote The Origins of Ruin. And they held a very special contest. They wanted the fans to be able to name their live DVD and CD. That, of course, became Frozen in the Moment, a name I picked, along with 2 other people, but hey, I was one of those 3 that thought the same idea, so it still counts. And it was very cool. I got a very special thank you note from Nick for being able to check it out and being able to pick out the name. I was able to get a copy of the live DVD and CD, and on the inside, I was able to have autographs from everyone in the band that played that particular show. I still have it up on a mantle of mine. I am so proud of that, and I love the fact that Redemption is still going to this particular day. And I'm always going to hold strong memories to The Origins of Ruin, to Frozen in the Moment, which happens to be a line from memory. That's why it meant so much to me. I love the song from the beginning. I felt like it would be very appropriate for a live album, and so did 2 other people. But hey, I was one of those 3. And yeah, I just thought that was a cool little story before we get into the next album, which starts to get even more darker despite the album cover being the polar opposite of dark, very light and bright. Snowfall on Judgment Day is up next, and this is another landmark album for the band. It's one that I really need to go back to more. For some reason, this is the album that I've always gone to the least, which makes absolutely no sense because I love every track on the album. And to talk about those Dream Theater ties, James LaBrie actually shows up on the song Another Day Dies. And if that title isn't mournful enough for you, the entire album is just so bleak, so dark, so proggy, so filled with great music, but it is a rough listen. Like, when you listen to Ray Alder singing on this, it just feels so heartbreaking. And this isn't even the most heartbreaking album. We'll be getting to that. But this album is just something that is a worthy follow-up to The Origins of Ruin, and it's just one that I know I need to get back to more. And for that reason, I'm gonna give it a B. Now we come to probably the hardest album to talk about for a multitude of reasons. The album known as This Mortal Coil. Now, this is an album of self-reflection in probably one of the hardest ways that could ever happen. Facing your own mortality. Around this time, Nick Van Dyke was diagnosed with cancer. And amazingly enough, he was able to battle through that cancer. But there was every single chance this was going to be the last Redemption album. I want to believe that he was on the other side of cancer around the time this album was coming out. But I know that he was writing songs during that time. And you can really hear it in the melodies. They're so dark. You can hear it in the lyrics. They're tear-jerking. And when I hear songs on here, it still makes me weep. In fact, a song like No Tickets to the Funeral is a song that I have on my funeral playlist for when I go, as morbid as that sounds. You know, it's like I got a little bit of popularity to me, although if you go by my YouTube numbers, you would never guess that. But hey, I've done a lot of interviews. A lot of people do seem to still know me in the music business. And, you know, it's just like, it's, you know, when I pass away, you know, it's not going to be a celebrity funeral. I'll be surprised if anyone even shows up. And I know Nick was kind of feeling the same way, you know, it's just like, it's not going to be a celebrity funeral, no one has to pay to get in, it's just another human passing away. And it's so odd to think about that because he is such a brilliant mind, both in his band and his careers, and he somehow still feels like he's just a person. And you can hear it through these songs, just the mortality, facing what could be your end. And, at some point it's going to be the end for all of us, no matter when it's going to be. I know a lot of people seem to not like this album because of the production or the mixing and the mastering. To me, yeah, it's not the most crystal clear production Redemption has ever done. But I think it matches the tone of the album so much, and it just gives it that rough, raw, aggressive feel. And it mixes with the emotions so perfectly on here. Yeah, I know a lot of people may disagree with this if you're looking at this, objectively, which is impossible because you can't look at art objectively. Everything is subjective, everything is your opinion, just like this list. And for that reason and more, I am giving this album an S. The Art of Loss is the next album, the 6th album from the band, and the first one not to feature Bernie Versailles. I talked about the aforementioned brain aneurysm that he was dealing with, and he may never come back to the band, which is an absolute shame because he was such a vital part to the band, and I loved what he did, and I can only hope at one point he is able to recover and at least join the band for even a guest spot, let alone rejoin the band. This is also another sad album to talk about, as this is the last album to feature Ray Alder of Fate's Warning. It's crazy to think about all of this because even with a name like The Art of Loss, there's so many great, almost joyful moments that happen in this album. Don't get me wrong, they didn't go off script. This is as dark progressive metal gets, especially for a band like Redemption. But it's just so great to see so many guest appearances on this album, being able to play in tribute to Bernie, seeing him recover the way that he has, hopefully in time. But you got Chris Poland, you got Chris Broderick, you got Marty Friedman doing a solo on here, and you have one of my favorite vocalists of all time, John Bush, singing in with another one of my favorite vocalists of all time, Ray Alder, on this album. It's so cool to see this. Although at this time, like in retrospect, it kind of feels like there needed to be some kind of change happening within the band at this point. I mean, there were so many bad things going on with the band at this time. And I love this album from start to finish, but it really does feel like something needed to change in a more positive way. Even though, again, this is a very dark progressive metal band. And it kind of feels that way throughout the album. Even though the songs are fantastic, the production miles better than this Mortal Coil. Like, everything seemed like it was going in the right direction, but I'm just thinking about this in retrospect. Probably of the Ray Alder stuff, this probably is my least favorite. Because, again, there were so many bad things going on here. And, a change was a-coming. And it was very needed. And, again, there's nothing horrible in this band. I love everything. I love every album from this band and everything they've put out. But I'm still going to give this album a C. And that change would come in the likes of Long Night's Journey into Day. And what a change there is. Not only is there a new keyboardist and one of the most magnificent musicians to ever record any kind of music ever in Vikram Shankar, you also have the vocal change. Like I mentioned, The Art of Loss is the last album to feature Ray Alder of Fate's Warning, but to keep on with that dark progressive metal trend that Redemption has done for so long, they had to get another singer who has been doing dark progressive metal for such a long time. And of course, I am talking about Tom England of Evergrey. And he absolutely crushes it on this album. He feels like he was meant to be a part of this band since day one. And from what I've heard of YouTube videos, he crushes the older material so very, very well. And of course, he owns the new music so perfectly. This feels like such a great redemption for the band, because like I kind of pointed out with The Art of Loss, I felt like there needed to be a change happening within the band. I didn't know what it had to be. Sometimes it doesn't need to be that huge of a change. I mean, when you look at Ray Alder with Fate's Warning, Theories of Flight did not change the band whatsoever. Same lineup, same label, same everything. But they were able to light a fire under themselves and be able to start a new chapter of the band, who is arguably at their peak era of the band. And I can almost apply that here, if not completely apply that to the new era of redemption. Long Night's Journey into Day is one of those albums that feels like such a great rejuvenation of the band. While not everything is perfect in the world, while not everything is perfect at the time that this album came out, it feels like this band was able to take all that darkness in the world, harness it, and create one of the best albums at that time. This is redemption renewed for that time. And it's so great to see what Tom England was able to accomplish on this album. And of course, the magnificent maestro of Vikram Shankar behind the keys. Seriously, I can't sing his praises enough. And this album was an excellent foundation for that new chapter of redemption. And I'm easily gonna give this an A. And finally, we gotta finish this out with the band's brand new 8th album, I Am the Storm, coming out this Friday through AFM Records. And this takes everything that you thought you knew about redemption and slightly changes it. And I mean that in the best way as well, because as I feel like Long Night's Journey into Day was a perfect rejuvenation of the band, I feel like I Am the Storm is where they realize that, hey, we can function the way that we always have. But let's not. Let's have a little more fun with it. Let's add a little more color to it. And you start to see little hints of that in Redemption. Like, there's actually some melody and harmony, some almost bright tones that kind of happens in Long Night Journey into Day. I Am the Storm, they flesh that out even further. Every member of the band has their moments to shine. Whether it's incredible drum fills, whether it's a little bit of a bass solo, whether it's Tom just being able to sing over what everyone does. You know, it's just, this feels like a little bit of an evolution for the band, which I didn't realize the band needed until I heard the album in full. Of course, it's still dark progressive metal. That's never going to go away. That's the core sound of the band. And if they ever got rid of that, they wouldn't be Redemption anymore. They would be something else. But instead of just dark palettes of color, there's more bright colors in this. And it's so great to see that. And the fact that they even cover Genesis on this album is just not something I expected. Like, the first time that I heard this album, I listened all the way through, and I wasn't familiar with that particular Genesis song. Turn It On Again. And it sounded so happy in comparison to what they normally do. And then I looked at the press release, which is what I always do. I want to listen to it first and then get my judgment going on after I read the press release and being able to manage the two. And the fact that they did a couple covers on this album, unfortunately the other cover is not on the promo that I have, but I'm very curious to check that out. You know, it's great to see that kind of color in the covers again. It's not just in the covers, it's in the other songs as well. It's still dark, but there's a lot of light going on. There's a lot of variation. There's a little bit of thrash going on, a little bit of power metal going on, almost black and death metal, almost. Like, it gets close to it, but never fully goes onto it. But there's also moments where it feels kind of poppy. There's moments where it feels like it's good old hard rock and stuff. And that's not to say they just threw everything against the wall and wanted to see what would stick. They just wanted to be able to show off more of who they are. And one thing that I particularly love about this as a prog nerd, they brought back the long songs. There are 2 songs on this album that are over the 12-minute mark, and that just makes me so happy. For others, they'll find it pretentious and bullcrap, and they'll wish that the songs were shorter. For someone like me, bring it on. I love prog bands being prog and not ashamed of being prog. And that's a great definition of what this album is really all about. They show all the sides of what the band is capable of. A couple cool covers, although I've only heard one so far, but I can only imagine that the other cover is just as cool. But it just shows the full palette of what Redemption is capable of. And in a rare feat, yeah, am I doing this? Am I doing this? I think I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm giving I Am the Storm an S. Now, I'll just give you a minute to be able to put this in its final order. I'll be right back. And we're back. And I decided to change things up just a little bit to be a little more fair to how I really feel instead of just trying to do everything from top to bottom in a normal tier list. I wanted to go with my own personal feelings, and this just felt right to me as I was putting everything together. The lone album at sea is Redemption's self-titled album. In the B territory is The Art of Loss, followed by The Fullness of Time. In the A category, we got Snowfall on Judgment Day and Long Night's Journey into Day. And then finally, in the S tier, we got I Am the Night, the brand new album coming out this Friday through AFM Records, This Mortal Coil, and my favorite album, The Origins of Ruin. Thank you very much for this long trek into Redemption's discography of all 8 LPs so far. There's a lot of highs, a lot of dark moments, and a lot of fun to be had. So I hope if you haven't checked out this band before, you'll check out what's going on here, hopefully listen to my words, and give them a spin. And of course, check out that new album. It is that good. And of course, if you like what I do, like, follow, subscribe, comment, do all of that stuff. And whether you agree with this list, disagree with this list, or you just want to tell me how wrong I am from my personal opinion, let me know down below. And until my next backwards marathon, top 10 list, interview, review, or any other kind of video that I put up here on Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel, this is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.